You don't have to be a die-hard comic book fan to know that death for superheroes and their villains is somewhat irrelevant. Characters are always resurrected in one way or another, but what about those villains who've been most screwed over by the resurrection lottery? The ones who look upon Joker with envied eyes. From DC, Marvel, and beyond, I'm Ewan, this is What Culture Comics, and here are 8 comic book villains who died and never returned. Number 8. The Ventriloquist, Arnold Wesker. Created in Detective Comics number 583 by Alan Grant, John Wagner, and Norm Breyfogle, Arnold Wesker was a Batman villain with a whole lot to him bar his puppeteering gimmick. A fundamentally tragic character with a troubled backstory, Wesker had dissociative identity disorder, with the more violent of which manifesting in a creepy-looking doll called Scarface. Scarface was everything the archetypal 30s gangster was, complete with a Chicago twang and a tiny Tommy gun to match. Throughout the Ventriloquist's many run-ins with Batman, the doll would domineer and bully Wesker, with only physical separation being able to undo the damage caused by their coupling. Unfortunately for Arnold, Scarface's absence had a long-lasting effect on his psyche. Subsequent misadventures left Wesker scarred, and before you know it, some of Gotham's most dangerous crime bosses were after his head, including the Great White Shark. The Shark sent a hitman called Tallyman after Wesker, who unceremoniously killed him off with a shot to the head. It would be years before he'd mount a return in 2 separate DC reboots, but as things stand, Wesker is one of the few Bat rogues never fortunate enough to cheat death, at least via typical means. Number 7. The Shredder, Oroku Saki. While the Shredder has returned in subsequent reboots of Eastman and Laird's original Mirage comic, he wasn't able to cheat death to begin with. Fans of the criminally underrated 1990 TMNT movie will no doubt remember the moment Shredder perished, plummeting from a rooftop into a garbage truck, which Casey Jones accidentally, set to crush mode. What they might not know, however, is that the scene was a homage to a far bloodier battle from the original Turtles comic, in which the heroes in a half shell have a bloody fight with their nemesis. The fight concludes with the Shredder revealing a concealed grenade, only for Donatello to save the day by hurling his bow staff at their one-time nemesis, causing him to fall off the roof and perish in a fiery explosion. A clone of Shredder would eventually emerge, which Leonardo decapitated, but technically speaking, in the original continuity at least, the Shredder died in the same issue he made his debut in, that being the very first. Number 6. Kirby. Frank Miller's Daredevil is a whole lot of things. Genius, revitalizing, and most definitely revolutionary, the former Batman scribe's stint on the character was seminal for a whole host of reasons and, in Daredevil's case, even character-defining. The stuff the writer did with Matt Murdock's mystical past has been transmuted to pretty much every medium at this point, nowhere more prominently than in the character's Netflix TV series where, pitted against the Hand, DD teams up with Elektra. Kirby proves to be a formidable match for both Murdock and his fellow lead, besting both heroes on several occasions and stymieing their progress in routing the ninja group from New York. After 2 close calls with the assassin, Elektra, Stick, and Daredevil come together to defeat him, delaying another potential resurrection by, wouldn't you know it, slicing his head clean off from his body. They also incinerate it for good measure. Kirby did later return in Miller's run, but after being defeated that time, Stick had his body destroyed completely. A lesson folks should probably apply to other villains, come to think of it. Number 5. Mirror Master, Sam Scudder. Although Batman and Spider-Man tend to take the cake when it comes to having the best villains out there, the Flash simply has to come close. Captain Boomerang, the Trickster, Reverse Flash, all have graced the pages of a Flash comic with their own seminal storylines to boast. One villain who has been somewhat overlooked, however, is Mirror Master, a guy with one of the coolest power sets out there. Gifted with the ability to manipulate mirrors, travel through them, and trap people within them, the original Mirror Master, Sam Scudder, quickly established himself as one of the Flash's most formidable foes. In the universe-ending event of Crisis on Infinite Earths, however, Sam was killed, along with Barry Allen, cast out into the mirror dimension with no way out. Others have since taken his place, and while a new 52 appearance came in 2011, the original Scudder was, for all intents and purposes, dead. Number 4. Alistair Smythe. Alistair Smythe might not stand out as being one of Spider-Man's most intriguing adversaries, but he did feature heavily in the character's 90s paraphernalia. Son of Spencer Smythe, the Kingpin's top science officer, Alistair was a gifted man with a keen interest in science. Obviously, his father's criminal connections had a bearing on where he'd go next, as when his father did die, as a result of his Spider Slayer program, he took to tracking down Spider-Man as a newly established enemy. Years would pass before Smythe would get his comeuppance for tormenting the Wallcrawler, but when it did come, in the pages of Superior Spider-Man, it was fairly brutal. With Dr. Octopus now in control of Peter's body, Smythe attempted to transmit his own conscious into the body of the web-slinger, only to be foiled by Otto, who, having exploited the same pathway before, had psychically blocked any potential conscious incursions from taking place. With his mind now in limbo, Smythe perished. Granted, this only happened a couple of years ago, and there is some cloning shenanigans going on with the character too, but the OG Smythe is still gone diddly on. Number 3. Electrocutioner. A fairly unknown Bat-villain, I want to say, until 2013's Arkham Origins released, old Lester Baczynski had a hard time of establishing himself as a truly threatening adversary for the Bat family, a fact reflected in the character's fairly unremarkable death. Created in 1992 by Chuck Dixon, Tom Lyle, and Scott Hanna, Baczynski was a hitman with some pretty wild weaponry. Sporting 2 electrified gauntlets, Baczynski dubbed himself the Electrocutioner, and subsequently went about carrying out his namesake by electrocuting anyone in the direction his employer would point him at. Not content with messing around in Gotham City, Baczynski set about interfering with Green Arrow and Roy Harper, the original Speedy and later Red Arrow, in Star City. In the truly woeful Justice League cry for justice, Baczynski pulled the plug on Star City by blowing literally all of it up, completing Prometheus' attack on the League and making an enemy of Green Arrow for life. After murdering Prometheus, Ollie tracks Baczynski down and very nearly kills him, being stopped by Black Canary before more harm could be done. That doesn't stop Roy Harper though, who kills the Electrocutioner with an arrow to the head after recovering from Prometheus' initial attack. He did have a brief cameo after the New 52 came around, but for all intents and purposes, this guy is as good as toast. Number 2. Brother Blood. The first one. The Teen Titans are DC's premier youth-oriented crime-fighting group, so it makes sense that they've dealt with their fair share of evil weirdos over the years. One such evil weirdo was Brother Blood, an evil cultist who dragged the Titans themselves into the self-proclaimed Church of Blood, a cult based on sacrifice and, well, just about every evil thing you can imagine, really. Each and every last brother has gotten to where he is after murdering the previous one, and while the Titans themselves weren't inclined to kill the man, that didn't stop one of Blood's own followers. While the cycle again perpetuates, the First Blood, who many would deem to be the most iconic, has never returned, not in a resurrection and not in a reboot. And number 1, Justin Hammer. To fans of the MCU, Justin Hammer is a cocky competitor to Tony Stark, and a character brought to life by Sam Rockwell in Iron Man 2. He differs slightly in the comics though, lacking the comedic timing of his on-screen counterpart, who, let's face it, has been criminally underutilized on screen. If there's one thing that the comic book version has over the other, however, is that he perished in a pretty spectacular way. Not spectacular in the sense that he went down in a blaze of glory or anything, it's just that he wound up in space somehow. After one last gasp attempt at destroying Stark, Hammer, now diagnosed with cancer, takes to his space station. In the chaos, he winds up being frozen in a block of ice and gets jettisoned into space, never to return. A bit overkill maybe, but goddamn, that's a great way to go. And those were 8 villains who, at the time of recording, died and never came back. Know of any other evildoers who kicked the bucket permanently? Let me know down in the comments below, drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to Wild Culture Comics so you don't miss another upload going forward. I've been Ewan, I sincerely hope that wherever you are, you're doing okay, and I will see you next time. Bye!